to the authority, and so I wanted to introduce our newest member, but also have everybody on the authority introduce themselves, so we all once again get acquainted or reacquainted. Tom DePonte with Framatome, chair of the authority. Rob's not here, so.
Sure. Scott Koppel, BWXT. Regina Carter, I think most of you know, she retired at the end of the fiscal year, and the company's going to miss her. She's a good friend. We wish her well, and looking forward to working with you all.
Welcome.
Well, thanks.
Hi, Tim Stoller with the Virginia Economic Development Partnership.
Yeah, Rich Diddens for Center for Engineering Research and Education at Liberty University.
I'm Mark Horstmeyer. I'm the Dean of Engineering at Liberty University.
April Wade, I'm the Executive Director of Virginia Nuclear Energy Consortium.
Gary Tepper, the Chair of Mechanical and Nuclear Engineering here at VCU.
Ken Ball, Dean of the Volgenos School of Engineering at George Mason University.
Andrew Hutton from Jefferson Lab.
Gene Graycheck, representing the American Nuclear Society.
David Christian, retired executive, Dominion Energy.
Larry Corky, Energy and Regulatory Manager at the Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy.
Brandy Fraser-Bestfitch, State Regulator for NEC.
Jordan Burns, also with
Bob Bailey, Center for Advanced Engineering Research. I apologize, Ken got the last parking place.
No, sorry about that.
I've been driving around looking for a parking lot.
Getting a little full over there. Okay, so I did before, we had suspended last meeting the approval of minutes. There were no changes for the minutes for the May meeting, but we did not have a quorum, so we had suspended the approval. So what I'd like to do is, we didn't have any changes for the May meeting, but if we want to take a minute, and if folks haven't had a chance to review the September meeting minutes, please go ahead and do so now, and we'll listen for any changes or edits folks have.
These are the same ones that were sent out?
These are the same ones that were sent out, so if you've already had a chance to look at them, that's good.
Thank you.
Okay, I have one change. I noticed, Gene, there's a misspelling on your name. Okay, so we have that correction. Any other changes that folks saw? Okay, we have a motion for Andrew, motion to approve minutes for both September and May. Great. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Okay, thank you. So our guest speaker today, we're going to hear from Dr. Horstmeyer, our new dean at Liberty University, although not as new, because he's been there a few months now, right? January. So anyway, wanted to hear what he's got going there. There's a lot of exciting things going on at Liberty, so the floor is yours. Yeah, we can come down here.
In Northern Virginia at the Bechtel office. We had about a little less than 50 people attend just to talk about the industry as it is right now and where we want it to go. And you can see we focused on, we really just focused on what we have here in Virginia, but also what we want to do here. We see that Virginia has a huge, we have a strong foundation in the industry, but how are we going to get to the next step to go into some of these new technologies and keeping them here in the state? So after the summit, we put together, I'm putting together what's called our legislative document. And we do hope during this next legislative session that we will have some legislation and some other actions to work on just to help us as an industry go forward. We did all this, I forgot to mention, with the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. They've been a great partner for us. They helped us at the summit. They moderated some of the events, but they also have seen that the nuclear industry is an asset, and that's an asset that we need to cultivate. Let's see, this was September 18th, I believe, the governor signed an executive order 43 that he wants the state of Virginia to be 100% carbon-free by 2050. That's a great goal. In the executive order, he only talks about wind and solar. But in the press release, he does mention nuclear. So we did see that as something that we can work and build upon. It is a goal in the next few months to see if we can work with the administration and legislators to promote nuclear as a clean energy source. You've seen it nationally. You're going to see it here more and more in the state that we're going to try to work on that. We see some ends with some of the new legislators that are coming in that we think this is possible, but we also see some ways on the executive actions that we can do. For one, the governor's energy plan needs to be, I think it's again in October, submitted. The governor will release his plan. We hope that nuclear will be included. We're going to work really hard, unlike last time that when nuclear was missed. Any questions on the executive order?
April, you mentioned that it's not in the code. Is there anybody proposing to revise the code?
April is.
We are going to talk about see if we can revise it. But I will tell you this: we want to work with the wind and solar industry as well to see what we can do to come together on this. I did attend the Virginia Renewable Conference the same day this was released. I was the only person there from the nuclear industry. I stood out. A couple of people were like a little surprised. Brandy introduced me to some people. That was nice of her. And the governor, when he gave his speech, he did not mention nuclear. And I was disappointed in that. But again, I will see some hope and we have made some headway because we were included in the press release. We did an op-ed that we sent out around the state supporting the governor's efforts on this, but also just educating why nuclear is important. If you're going to have this conversation about wind and solar, as you all know, it's great. Have that conversation. But if you're going to talk about carbon-free and you want base load, we have to be in the conversation. I got invited, VEDP, and had me attend another meeting in Northern Virginia on a group that was getting together to talk about renewables. At first, people were a little surprised that I was in the room. But again, the conversation was, they saw that we're on the same page. They were excited about what we did with the 17th Energy Cluster because they weren't aware of that, this wind and solar group. Senator Kane was there. He was very interested and glad to see us there. So I see little hopes for us. One of the priorities that we're going to talk about is nuclear innovation. So what we want to do is identify opportunities for here in Virginia on advanced reactor, small modular reactor, something here that we can do in Virginia. What that will be, I don't know. There's a couple of ideas out there, but we want the state to also be engaged in helping us locate areas where we can do a project. Also want the state to help encourage us to bring those projects here. These new projects, small modular reactor, Virginia is a place to do it. Now granted, we all know what's going on out west in Idaho. It's a competition, but it doesn't mean that we can't do something here in Virginia. We have the ports. Projects, advanced projects should be here in Virginia. We're talking about manufacturing, and we have it here. So there's no reason why it shouldn't. We just need to promote that. Let's see. Identify research and development opportunities for the academic institutions. One of these is that we've been talking about for a long time is a research facility. What that will look like is still up in the air, but we're going to try to work with universities to see if they can put a plan together what a research facility will look like. Gary, we haven't gotten to that level yet, but that's what our goal is to do, is to hopefully Liberty, VCU, Virginia Tech, UVA, everybody to get together to put together an idea of what a facility would look like to help get some of these grants here to the universities in Virginia. So that's one of the ideas.
April, what would a roadmap look like to be able to do some of those steps?
Let me go back. For the research,
Yeah.
that is really, we need to start putting together, educators need to come together and say what they would like. What would that look like? Everybody has talked to me saying we need a research facility. That's great. I agree. That would be nice to have that here in Virginia. But what does that look like? What is it going to do? What is it going to answer? How is it going to get more research dollars here? Now, we have the IST. You still have it. It's a great facility. But we built it. They didn't come. And we need to make sure we build something that people are going to come and we are going to develop. And there is going to be research grants for here in the state. So
it seems to me like we ought to be looking at how universities and industry come up with that plan together. I mean, industry is ultimately going to be our customer, the university's customer.
That's true.
Because they know what the needs are for over the horizon. The university then can adapt to the industry needs, in my opinion.
And this is a bigger conversation. I think Tom and I have talked about this a lot, and I've been, I think I've been on 5.5 years with PNAC. It's been a conversation from day one. But what does that look like? But I think the universities have to set up, help set that conversation up. I think the companies will come and work with you, but there's research dollars out there from DOE, and so NRC. So we have to get those grants too. We have to look at that. But how are you going to work with the companies? We still have to work on that conversation. But I still think the universities have to come up with some way to help. What is their need? You all need to ask what the need is and see about how working together. I mean, disagree, this is a long conversation, but I think we have to, that's what BNEC has been supposed to be about, is coming up with that, have universities and companies work together, and it's still something we are discussing. Yeah. But it's hopefully we're trying to push it a little bit more forward. But I still think the universities have to come together and say what they would like. And then the companies can come in and help with that and get some buy-in.
Well, I think part of our vision is to develop a workforce that's relevant. And so we need that from the industries. So
Great.
Firms like Dominion and DWXT and Framatome, what type of student do you need? And we can adapt our curriculum to meet your needs. And I would curious like if Gary has the same viewpoint as that or Ken. But that's part of where we think we need to go.
Well, and I'll just go, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because that brings us into well, it just disappeared. That one, the last slide.
This one?
So exactly, what is this workforce gonna look like? I think the workforce today and what the workforce is gonna look like 5 to 10 years from now is going to change. And so we do need to work with the industry to understand that. And we need to make sure the universities understand what that need is. If we bring a small modular reactor in, or we're manufacturing parts, do we have those skills right now? Probably, but we need to advance that. And make sure we have the workforce that can, they'll be there for the industry. So I agree with you. We're working towards that. That's part of the 17th Energy Cluster, to make sure that those jobs are more focused. But we still have some work to do on that.
So yeah, I was just going to say, I think that the energy clusters are a really good example of how this can be extended even to the kind of relationship between industry and the universities on more general or more specific research opportunities. So one of the things I think, as you'll remember, that we heard earlier in the year when we were discussing what the energy cluster is going to do now that it's stood up, and with Dominion and others' leadership, is one, they're going to start convening discussions of what is needed.
They already have.
Or they already have, excuse me. That, yeah, and getting the principles from the industry side, but also with the education side, state level, high schools, all the curriculums to help build that pipeline. I think maybe one thing we can do is look at how then could we transfer that or mirror that in a higher education research capacity to combine that with what industry needs. I think one of the things we've struggled with is how do you convene the right parties to actually have that conversation. And the energy cluster, I think, has really, that's one of the big successes, is that it has gotten the right people together to have those conversations. So maybe we can use that as an example for how we figure out that dialogue between the right folks in industry and academia to see what is really needed and what's possible.
Senator Newman, who is the patron for that bill, he's made sure to talk to us about making sure the right people are in the room. You know, he wanted to make sure that the companies were represented, the industry was represented in this conversation, to make sure it's done right. They are taking their time, but they want to make sure that we don't miss anything and that it does what it needs to do. So if you haven't been in, I don't know if you, I think there's someone from Liberty that's on that. I know Dominion, Framatome, BFXT has been invited. I think pretty much everybody in this room has had some representative in there. You've been to all the meetings, haven't you?
All of them except for the one I think that was last week, because they're actually starting to build out the actual curriculum based on discussions. But
yeah,
anywhere there's been a hole, they've kind of reached out for fillers in that category.
Yeah, Matt Kellum has done a really great job. You know, we helped them get there, but now they have to put it together. So I think they've done a really good job, the BWC, on working with the state and getting this implemented the right way.
I think most of the universities and departments have nuclear corporations on their industrial advisory boards. And I have several people in this room on mine, separately from this. But I think what there's a nice opportunity is that those are advising on workforce development at each university. But I know of no organization that's sort of coordinating between the universities and sort of making strategic decisions that could lead to shared research, cooperative research programs and large center grants and things like that.
And we hope that the universities would come together when we have our board meetings. We have tried, but we only have BCU and Virginia Tech are on our board right now.
Right.
But agree, we need to get more. That's what I was trying to say earlier, is have the universities come together more, and then let the industry come in as well. But I think I still believe that you, as the educators need to come up with what they want and how they think they can, where they can fit in, but then let the industry come in and help them navigate that.
So I think, go ahead, Andrew, sorry.
Yeah, so can it be difficult?
No. Would you?
Would I? I see workforce development as following. You're providing the people that the industry needs. And that indeed is one of our goals for 2020, Goal 4. Goal 3 is different. Goal 3 says R&D, we want to be leading. And your comment was immediately, you're interested in the following. I'm a researcher. I think that we ought to be asking more the question, how do we lead? And if you're going to have a research facility, that should be pushing Virginia into the lead. So, for example, small modular reactors, we lost the lead, didn't we? Why aren't we second?
So I think that, well, that, and you're recognizing why those were two separate
And
items.
that's correct.
Right, and I think, because that was one of the things that came out of the summit is, so workforce actually, like you said, it means a lot of different things as Colleen's discussed before, right? There's construction workforce, welders, those types of things are very important in addition to the highly trained engineers and things like that. So yes, there was a purposeful differentiation there. And I think one of the things April and VNEC have looked at is exactly that, right? So the energy cluster is getting to and starting a lot of the workforce, and then there needs to be some action to continue that. Separately, there's a discussion around R&D and what that capability could be, and that was, yeah, I think you're right on there, and that was the point, even in recommendations.
You're not being difficult. You're right on.
Yeah.
Shoot.
Sorry. That's kind of the heart of it. And on the 17th cluster, I agree with what Bechtel's always said, but when we've gone in and talked about workforce, it's not been about the nuclear engineers, not all of it. It has been about the skilled labor that is needed, and we've made sure to make that point over and over, that these are good jobs, and that they can lead to better jobs, but the welders are needed. One of my favorite things going on the Hill is with another client long ago is going to talk to staffers about welding programs that a company had. They get out of the program, welders are making $100,000 a year. You should see what these 20-something Hill staffers think when they hear, with no debt, how much skilled labor is needed. So, let's see, we have talked, I think we've talked about this one, and we kind of jumped around. Jobs, is that everything? That's everything. So we're putting together our priorities for the legislators, some actions that we want to, by the governor. Hopefully we can work with the governor and continue working with BEDP. They've been a great partner for us. And getting some actions going. The summit really helped us put together our list of priorities. You guys will, next time we meet, I will have more of an update on where we're at on these priorities and more specifics on what we're doing. But we will have legislation in this next legislature. We have, even though there's a change in the legislature, we do still really feel confident that we'll be able to get some things passed. We have some great support still in Lynchburg with legislators. Representative Scott Garrett, who is actually one of the founders of VNEC and VNEC, he retired. But the gentleman that took his place, I met with him a couple weeks ago. I think he is going to be equally a champion for our industry. So we still feel pretty positive that we'll be able to get some things done during this legislature, but it's going to be stepping stones. We're not going to get everything that we all want in one legislature, but we will be able to make some headway, I think, this year. And especially on, hopefully, getting, when we talk about clean energy, making sure nuclear is in that conversation here in Virginia. Any other questions? Thoughts of what we need to be doing? So I'm doing everything right? Thank you, guys.
Things I think that we talked about at the last meeting as we're getting ready for preparation of the annual report, which is what we're going to talk about next, is trying to make sure we're actually putting forward recommendations for action by the governor's office and the legislature. And the summit that April just talked about, the output of that, I think has informed what has gone into this draft document that we're going to discuss here, where we're actually looking at telling a story of what happened this year and what the recommendations as an advisory body, which is kind of our role, right, our charter, is making, and then VNEC as the action body, I guess, will be discussing in greater detail come December, January, and into 2020. So April just kind of gave you an overview of the areas which you'll see reflected in here under the strategic recommendations for 2020. Before we get to kind of general comments about the annual report and other edits, I did want to kind of focus in there because I think that's the section of most substance out of the report. The idea being here is that we know kind of where we were last year at this time when we included last year in the annual report the recommendations for the governor's energy plan, which were not included, which I think launched a lot of what's happened in the remainder of 2019. The dialogue, I think the very productive dialogue with VEDP, with Secretary Ball, the participation in the summit, and now the recommendations that have come out of that. So you can see the 4 categories here. I will assure you and defer to April a little bit here, there's a lot more substance behind these recommendations, but we didn't think we needed to overwhelm them with, because frankly a lot of that's going to be working activity in terms of legislative language and what actual implementing actions there will be behind these more high level areas. But so why don't we, if we can, what are folks' initial thoughts on these kind of 4 areas of recommendation? Are there changes that we need to make, other things that we need to clarify?
My thoughts are more semantic than they are content, because I agree completely with having them be concise in here, but to be concise, then you have to also make sure that they're clear and specific. So for example, define clean and carbon-free, those words have definitions. What we're really saying is we want to establish a standard what those words mean among a group of people. I'm not saying that's the right word either, but
well, so yes, I agree in common.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
and prioritize nuclear energy over what, or half or whatever. I mean, so I'm just saying, if we could be a little bit more specific about those.
So I will say there is no definition of clean or carbon-free in the Virginia code. That's the point of this. So
well, even adding that then makes it more specific.
It does. It does, but what that's going to look like yet, and I think that's why I think the idea was to be as general, is we're still trying to figure out what the avenues and how to go about it. So we could definitely be specific, but that may change. We want to be included in that, and I think we didn't want to put ourselves in a corner, and that's why we were trying to be general, just to make sure that we have room to move forward. Sometimes when people see things in black and white, they think that's it. But we want room to make sure that we can have the ability to make this actually happen. So that's why it's general.
Okay, that's right. That's just when I read it. That's my first thought. Is I'm not quite sure what the outcomes of these are.
Well, so I think, yes, that's a good point. The clean and carbon-free one, I think that's because it's to be determined, right? There's still a question as to what is the executive order that the governor issued this fall become in terms of the legislative session next year, right? So that's an executive order that it will govern policy for now, but it's not in law in terms of, the legislature could follow up next year and actually pass say a carbon-free by 2050 standard, just like you could a renewable portfolio standard or something else like that. And in that event, we want, like you said here, carbon-free needs to include all carbon-free sources like nuclear. So I guess that's kind of the example of we don't necessarily know what all the legislating
We don't know what the governor's gonna
bodies
do.
are.
I mean, he hasn't released what his, what he wants to focus on during this legislature yet.
So at least as an initial step, the definition that or the inclusion that we're talking about as nuclear needs to be part of whatever solution that we do.
So define a clean and carbon-free energy standard.
Yeah.
That's clear. Tell them what to do, but
Yeah, and that's kind of what we say. The code. I mean, yeah, we could add. Well, the only reason I don't want to add standard at the end of that is because what if it takes on a different avenue, right? Maybe it's not a standard. Maybe it's a regulatory instruction to the Corporation Commission or something like that.
I think it's still a standard, however it's defined.
Standard with a lowercase s.
It says standard in the first sentence.
First sentence.
It says.
Just for my education, is the executive order, okay, it's focused on, it's not all energy, it's just electricity.
Correct. Yes, correct.
So nobody's really done a primary energy look-see because electricity use could go up and emissions theoretically could go up slightly, but total emissions go down as transportation moves from petroleum to electricity.
Yes.
The policy
Especially if
goal
you-
is to limit global warming to 2 degrees,
In my comments, I agree with the 4 recommendations. I think those are the right ones. And just-
So I guess the question.
I guess it depends on who the main audience for this report gets back to the legislature.
I'm in on number 3 though. I'm not
Yep.
sure what a nuclear research center does for you. Absent, I mean, I think a good goal ahead of that would be to establish and strengthen relationships with national labs such as Jeff Labs in Idaho in particular on advanced reactors. Would be money well spent. I'm not sure, I mean, you could have a virtual research center by virtue of relationships, a physical.
And that has been mentioned, the virtual, but as I was saying earlier, is that the universities have to come up with, if that's gonna work, that's great, I agree with you, but we need that kind of direction. But I've also heard the brick and mortar, but I like the virtual idea, I think that's probably easier to put in place, but we need that direction of what would be workable.
Well, so I think probably to build on that, rather than trying to define that here, is to just add something to number 3 to say, develop and enhance relationships with current research at the national laboratories or something of that sort.
Yeah.
Because that would probably, long before you'd be able to build a brick and mortar thing, you could certainly start working on those kinds of relationships and programs.
But I also think that goes to, and I think it's a great idea, that the state learn what's going on in the industry and research and development with the labs and what opportunities are out there.
I mean, so for example, to add on to what Gene's saying, 3 utilities have been selected to work with INL on hydrogen production and movement to a hydrogen economy using existing nuclear plants. And why is Dominion left out of that, or why is Virginia left out of that? Yeah.
Who are the 3 companies?
What's that?
You said there was 3 companies.
It's Exelon, APS, and First Energy Solutions.
Exelon, First Energy, what was the middle one?
Arizona Public Service.
Palo Verde.
Palo Verde. So I like the idea of, so maybe if we add to the end of it,
Is it, throwing this out, would it be better for that goal to say, rather than promote nuclear energy infrastructure and R&D, is promote or support programs that increase the capacity for nuclear energy R&D? Because that's both infrastructure and intellectual expertise. Or is that too broad?
No, that's fine. I mean, increasing the capacity for the R&D.
And if it's physical infrastructure, intellectual expertise.
Realistically, in terms of the dollar flow from DOE, Idaho is always going to be a key player in making Idaho aware of the capacity that Virginia has would be.
Right. And have Idaho work with folks here. That's what you want. That's bringing their capacity into the state. That's what we want. But it doesn't preclude an independent center or bricks and mortar or any of those other things.
Yeah, I don't mean to preclude bricks and mortar. I'm just thinking that best use of limited resources might be first focus on the relationships and trying to draw Idaho into Virginia.
so what if we added promote nuclear energy infrastructure and capacity for advanced nuclear R&D, and then at the end of the paragraph,
And then under the such as list,
yeah,
add relationships, partnerships, collaboration.
how about we just say collaboration?
Or just collaboration. That's the nice broad term. Right? So there you've got, Advanced Nuclear Center, that's physical infrastructure, university scholarship and R&D programs, that's intellectual expertise.
We'll say national labs.
Yeah.
ARPA-E would be another one.
This is, can you all hear me? This is Sean Agnew from UVA.
Yep.
Okay. I think one thing that's not being said yet is that because this topic is so political, the funding from the feds is very sporadic. It's very up and down. We've seen the budgets for research in this domain go wildly up and down over the past few years. And I think for that reason, universities may be reluctant to put a lot of steam behind pursuing those monies. And brick and mortar investments, such as those which exist in other states, keeps an inertia. People keep striving in Tennessee and Idaho and other places where they need to maintain their brick and mortar investments. So I think maybe what we're trying to say in terms of research center or something is if there's a legislative commitment here in the state to help smooth the political bumps that this field has at the federal level, I think that's really the important an important point. I don't know how to put that into 3 words or less, but it's something we've not mentioned.
Yeah, so I don't want to sound like a downer here, but the only reason that Idaho and Oak Ridge exist is because they were built as part of the Manhattan Project. And so the idea was to salvage as much of that investment as possible and keep it going. I'm not sure that I could come up with a compelling reason why yet another brick and mortar laboratory needs to be built when we have these gigantic facilities out there that are currently underutilized. So I'm not saying it's not a good idea, and I think that if there was some specialized area that made sense where the capabilities don't exist, I don't want to discourage it, but if we're going to be developing nuclear capabilities within Virginia, it makes more sense to try to use the physical capabilities that already exist and come up with research dollar flow and have the research dollar flow flowing here, that you can have the students here and postdocs here, but not focus on building a laboratory, which is, I have a hard time visualizing the circumstances under which such a thing could even happen.
I think that's a great point, because you're using the dollars you already have and what it can
Yeah.
spend.
Just chiming in again, I agree entirely with you. I'm not advocating for brick and mortar. I'm just stating the obvious benefit that those places have from those Manhattan Project investments. And so just how to articulate that we have something good here in Virginia. How do we exploit that to develop our own inertia? That's all.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
And, you know, to add to what you're saying, the general trend right now is for states to take a leadership role in clean energy. It's a leadership that's been at the state level, not at the federal level. Although we do enjoy currently good bipartisan support in Washington for nuclear, and budgets are cracked up, and they could go down sometime in the future. But states are demonstrating the leadership, and that's perhaps because that's where I'm not sure exactly why. I will say that even in Germany, the German government is now rethinking the nuclear phase out. They're not public about it. They just realize they cannot get to the carbon emissions goals any other way.
I'll throw something out that I thought was really interesting in working with BWXT and the IST. So they have NuScale coming out today. They're actually going to use that facility, which I think is just fantastic. But we're in discussion with BWXT about virtualizing the IST, because it's an ecumenical facility. It can be used by anybody, and that's the goal. And being able to virtualize it makes it available to the other universities and other industries that are listening. Kind of a concept we probably should think more about, as we don't necessarily need brick and mortar everywhere we go. We can actually virtualize it and allow people to remote in.
Can I ask a question more maybe to the university? So you have the National Science User Facility, it's either NSUF? NSUF. Are any of our facilities or your facilities, classified or fall into that category? You mentioned the national labs, it's run through the labs, and I'm just curious, because it sort of gives you that, it's not a formal accreditation, but it puts you on a list as a user facility for others to come in and use.
Basically moves you to the top of the list for funding.
Right, it's just, it tends to be national labs, those type of facilities. I'm just curious, it's more of a curiosity question, not to change any wording, but it's flipping it on its head, back to the point of bringing in the dollars, and keeping the dollars, and attracting people to want to use Virginia's infrastructure that already exists. Anyway, just kind of throw it out there. Just thinking, just flipping it around, just based sort of what Rich said, just in that mindset anyway.
Yeah, so we've been pursuing opportunities where we actually work with BWXT as a sponsorship, where we get the Q clearance, or else we work with other companies that have facility clearance, whereas we had to do work inside a skip. So we've been pursuing that, but we don't have a facility clearance.
Curiosity. Either mine, that's why I asked.
I can't think of it.
So, I guess one other kind of contextual point that I think gets to what Gene and David were referencing here. One of the things that was discussed, and we tried to capture it a little bit in the preamble here, is and we talked a little bit about it with April, is there's an opportunity to attract this investment through the state being a partner, right? That's kind of the idea here. And if we set up a framework where clean is defined correctly with nuclear, where there is a prioritization for projects, where there's potentially areas where there's actual partnership from the state to attract some of these projects, as Scott and I have talked about. You know, there's federal engagement, even as Sean alluded to, even as it ebbs and flows based on budget cycles, there is momentum building for actual projects and investment that we think, you know, Virginia needs to be at the forefront to be able to attract those, whether it be the actual plants or projects themselves, or the infrastructure that goes to supporting it, right? The component manufacturing, the engineering resources, the testing, or the virtual simulators and things like that. So that was kind of what some, especially I would say items 2 and 3 in this list are alluding to kind of the next steps, which would be what are the actual policy vehicles that the state can set up to attract those types of things, right? So are there cost sharing proposals, right? Are there siting studies? Is there infrastructure that the state can be a partner on as opposed to just the university or private investment? So I think, you know, you were right. I think I agree with Gene. Attracting another national lab, I think that's a tough business case to.
And I wouldn't disagree with that.
But there may be very more targeted facilities or other projects that, if the state is ready to be a partner, like Idaho is a lot of times, like Tennessee or Texas or these other places are, we already have a lot of the resources here. Right, you know, BWXT, you guys have announced some investments in Lynchburg already that's aimed at this advanced nuclear market, right? So anyway,
Perhaps
I understand what you're saying about the state being a partner and attracting investment, but I think it kind of gets back to April. Is what's the plan? Are we talking fundamental research? Are you talking applied research? And if you're talking applied research, well, you already have applied research.
Well, but is it all?
If it's not guided, then it's puts everybody in an awkward position to go say, you know, we want a facility.
Well, and I was telling Gary, I mean, I've heard from, I feel like I'm just a go-between, trying to navigate this from what I've heard from the universities and what I hear from the industry, and there needs to be a longer conversation about this topic. But it's not just, you know, we want the state to be partners in attracting other businesses here. If there's an opportunity for a small modular reactor to be built and manufactured, why not Virginia? There's no reason for it not to be in Virginia. With our ports and with what we already have here, there's no reason why it should be in another state. We just want to make sure that the state works with us and like you all do with any. I mean, look at Amazon. I mean,
well, that's what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good model that you know, that the state put a lot of money into things called the tech talent pipeline, and you're the biggest player in that, investing in the production of computer science graduates and the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative, CCI, and tech talent pipeline. That was two huge investments that the state put into higher education. That's a model, but it was precipitated, like you said, by attracting and kind of workforce development for Amazon's investment in the region. So,
hey Tim, correct me if I'm wrong. VDP does not have a portfolio on energy industry at all, right?
By portfolio, you mean?
Like just specifically going after energy companies in general.
I think that's evolving.
It's evolving.
Evolve is the best way to characterize it.
With offshore
today.
wind, you guys have been focused on that. But as outlook of the energy industry, it's not something you guys have specifically been like not like Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just want to make sure that we're raising our hand and saying, we have opportunities, work with us to get there.
Yeah, and I think I would add to that, that it's not so much that it's been excluded
No.
either, it's just that kind of sectors generally has been an evolving story within VEDP in terms of how we focus on those. So it's not excluded from any
No.
list, yeah.
No, it's not, and don't get me wrong, I don't think
Yeah.
we've been excluded, I just think that we've been, as an industry, like many industries, we've been just going along, but there's a change in our industry that we need support from the state to make sure everybody knows that Virginia is a great place. It should be here.
Can I make a comment, if you mind? Just being here since January, the infrastructure here in Virginia is just amazing. It really is. And I suggest, and I don't know if it exists, but a strategic plan, and I mean strategic, not tactical. When you say 2020, to me that's tactical, not strategic. I'm talking about 2030. What does it look like in the year 2030 here? And what would you like it to look like? So the vision first, what do you see? What's possible? Okay? And then from this vision, what you possibly see, what's the mission of what you do? And there's different aspects to this. You know, there is the R&D, and if you talk about technical readiness levels from 1 through 9, then you're hitting all these, right? And you have a mapping of technical readiness levels 1 through 9, and where each has their role and responsibility, even the people around the room here, and how they fit into that full, plan that you see. When you have a plan like that, and then you do the finance. You can get the data analytics, and you can put it in there, and you can fit this. So it's really strategic in a sense. And you buy in, and that's easier to sell to me to a leader, whether it's Rick Perry, DOE, or the governor of Virginia, or whoever, that it's coherence. It's a cohered look group from one state, that it's all moving to, the machinery's all moving this way. So if you start from a systems level thinking to this time frame. Anyway, throw that on the table.
One thought that popped into my head on the economic development side, I was still at Virginia Tech back around 2010 or something like that, and we had one of these top secret, given a code name, potential massive employer that would come into Montgomery County and create a massive data center with the servers and everything, right? And we were all involved, and it's top secret, and we don't know who it is, and we've got these code names, and we thought we were going to get it. And then they came in and said, we're committed to only using electricity from renewable sources. You can't provide the level we want. Bye, sayonara. They went somewhere else. I don't know if you remember that, if you were involved in it at all.
I don't think I was involved in that one, because that would have been Appalachian Power, I suppose. But I mean, we get the same.
So my thought is to connect the dot.
That's why Amazon and Facebook like Virginia,
Right.
and Microsoft. And
So if we want to have a broader view of the economic development opportunities around nuclear energy, if companies will accept nuclear energy, when they want to be socially conscious and all that, and a lot of these companies like the Amazons, that is important to them, then that helps us to push more in that direction where we don't lose those opportunities. In fact, we use it as an attraction, because there are a lot of other sites that were in consideration that lost out as well, because they couldn't provide, say that, all your energy comes from good sources, and, if we're breaking through again on nuclear being viewed as a good source of electricity, then the state could go out and market that as, come to Virginia, we've got a great environment, and oh, by the way, we can provide power for you, and then you can broaden that into, whether it's modular reactors or, a modern grid or these cybersecurity things that we have going on, tie it all together, and then give a broad package to attract companies and business in. That could get the Commonwealth interested, and that to me would make sense in a broader strategy why they would support something like this. If it's just like why we need our own research lab and we're going to do modular reactors, I don't see that having appeal here in Richmond. But I think if it's like, oh, this will be an important tool to attract even more companies like Amazon, you know, bring them here to Virginia, that could get people excited.
And Ken, what, you know, the national labs are doing nothing with entrepreneurship. Why couldn't Virginia be an entrepreneurial nuclear thing and be a leader in that? You know, I mean, it's one component. It's like you're saying, an overwhelming big picture view with all these components that are, you know, put in there.
One company that is looking at small modular reactors came and talked to me, and I actually took them to BDP about a year ago. But they're looking at, you know, being on the West Coast, and which is fine. That's close to Idaho. But his perspective is that the ports here in Virginia are our biggest asset. And that is one of the things that we, you know, if they're going to manufacture small modular reactors or any advanced technology, Virginia is the place to be. If you want to be able to get it outside of the U.S., Virginia is where we need to be at.
Well, even, you know, and tying in with maritime business, you know, we're going to have nuclear-powered commercial ships and tankers, and even there's groups that are proposing having, you know, power plants on ships to take them to places in crisis, refugees and natural disasters and things like that. I don't know, you know, if that's viable, but if it were, Virginia would be a logical place to do that, given the nuclear fleet in Norfolk. We could, you know, leverage that.
Ken, I think to some degree, that Virginia actually is marketing ourselves as somewhat clean, you know, taking advantage of what we do have, and it can do even more of that with offshore wind coming in. But I agree with your concept that it ought to be kind of a big package. You ought to have maybe nuclear for hydrogen production and hydrogen for hydrogen economy leader, that kind of thing. So I think there's something to your idea. And I like the innovation idea too, the entrepreneurship.
So, agree with all of this. I think that was the thinking that went into a lot of the discussion at the summit. And that's a lot of the recommendations that have come out of it is specifically targeted at that, right? So we've spent a fair amount of time on specifically the R&D piece, but there are a lot of opportunities that are potentially coming down the pipe here, and we don't necessarily know which ones are ripe right now for Virginia, but the idea that we were coming at this from was, how do we make sure we utilize the assets that the Commonwealth has and partner and get the state to be seeing that as an asset so that we're ready to take advantage of those things. And there are tools that companies, universities, prospective companies, even other countries can see Virginia as that partner. And so when we talk about, you know, I think that it starts with just having a carbon-free system that's already supporting that, and I think we're on our way there with, you know, second license or subsequent license renewal for North Anna and Surrey. One of the things I think it's interesting is a carbon-free goal by 2050 is going to include, has to include those plants. They're already being relicensed. That they will be here in 2050, which is great. That's going to be a huge percentage of that of that support. But then things like North Anna 3, what does that, you know, what does that become? And other projects, and so that was kind of the idea. And as April talked about, there's a evolving, more detailed kind of legislative proposal that VNEC's working on, because that's kind of their role. That will be something in next year, and probably the next few years will be a roadmap to do some of this stuff. You know, one of the things is even pushing more collaboration between VEDP, VNEC, and DMME to set that strategic plan. right? What are assets, what are projects we should be going after?
So Tom, I was thinking, how do we take advantage of the last 30 minutes of discussion
Yeah.
here?
And include,
And perhaps maybe the simplest way to do that is in recommendation 1, where we, right at the end of that paragraph, we talk about directing DMME to give nuclear energy equal treatment as it pertains to cleaner carbon-free energy initiatives, including economic development proposals.
I think that's great.
That way, at least it brings it into that picture, so it's not just some research thing, it's economic development.
yeah, it's not a one-off.
And I can tell you, in my legislative document, we do talk about that. And so it does, I think that's a great thing to add on to. Because I mean, ultimately, that's what we've been saying all along.
Okay, in the interest of time and the fact that we would like to get to the point where we can actually approve this report, are there other changes or additions to the recommendations portion?
So this is
Yep.
Sean, I'm trying to chime in, Tom, and I would just suggest the keywords that people have mentioned which do not appear in the current draft are words like partnership, collaboration, port, entrepreneurial. Those are the kind of 4 keywords I heard people mentioning over and over, and if there was a way to weave those into one or more of these 1, 2, 3, 4 concepts, I think that would be great.
So I think we did capture collaboration in number 3 in one of the additions, Sean, so that's a good point.
Okay?
I agree.
Yeah, I'm not looking at your screen.
Yeah, no, I gotcha.
I mean, you talk about infrastructure. I mean, infrastructure is the ports. I mean, I don't think you need to specifically say the ports infrastructure that we have.
Yeah, and we kind of talk about exports too, so.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's keep, I'm gonna keep looking at this as we go. I think those are good suggestions. The rest of the document, now let's open it up to other changes, suggestions that folks have. I will say that some of this is language that we've included in the past. It's kind of standard stuff. But were there other changes or additions that folks had?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of them.
Perfect. Let's start.
On page 8, at the very top of the page, there's a bullet that says Dominion applied in 2018 for the Surrey 20-year license extension. At the same time, they said that they were intending to file a similar application for North Anna by 2020. And to not have North Anna included in here, I think is not fully descriptive of the situation. So I would just add a sentence to say that the company has announced its intent to file a similar license extension application for North Anna by 2020. Which would probably be within the time frame of this.
Let me just read this back to you, make sure. So So we're saying the company has announced a similar intention to file for North Anna in 2020. That's all right.
Yeah, then the other one's editorial on page 12, where we list the officers for the consortium. We say for 2018, I think that was supposed to be 2019. It should be.
Yep.
That's all I think.
Other company or organizational updates, I would love to have one from just Virginia.
No, but page 8, it would be wrong to say Jefferson Lab is active in research, development and use of nuclear technology. That's the second bullet.
So you want to just take Jefferson Lab?
I think in the context of that sentence, I would support it.
What do you mean, it was not active in research and development?
Well, active, yes, but not in nuclear energy.
It's not, it's an and nuclear.
You could say something like the second Gerald R. Ford class aircraft carriers in construction, propulsion systems are installed, or something like that, some update from N&I.
What's the use of nuclear technology?
That's really stretching.
I'm trying to be inclusive, but.
Other changes, additions? Scott, any UWXT?
To include, thank you for asking.
Enjoy working in your sky. That would actually be the plausibility to it.
Manufacturing.
No, actually, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, we're new scales manufacturing.
So that's exactly in line with the things that we're saying we should be trying to do.
Yeah, earlier this year, there's public information. Just get you- Oh, no, I know it's public.
It's public and it says here, so.
There's a number of things going on.
How does the UWXT is serving as a manufacturing partner for new scales?
Yeah, just
Probably for the public announcement, pull some words out of that, right?
That's what I'm
Put it
thinking.
in the press
Okay.
release.
Yep.
So the public announcement was actually September 2018.
I wonder if did we include that much?
I doubt it. I don't recall.
Will be included as well, and then we will include, VNEC has their own update that we include as a separate appendice, but that's not really for our review or approval. So unless there are other changes, I'll go through the ones that we've captured, so we have them. So on page, it's marked 4 here in our recommendations section, under the first recommendation at the very end, we're going to include a comma and say, including economic development programs. In the title of recommendation 3, we're going to change that to promote nuclear infrastructure and the capacity for advanced nuclear R&D. And at the end of that bullet, we are going to add collaboration with national labs, ARPA-E, and other universities. On page, it's marked 9, under the first bullet, for Dominion, we're going to add another sentence saying the company has announced a similar intention to file for extension of North Anna 3 in 2020.
Not North Anna 3. North Anna 1.
Excuse me, North Anna, I don't know why. 3, I just have NA written here.
Pretty good at explaining that one.
Yeah.
Optimistic.
That's strategic.
It's got an active license, right?
And then we're going to add a bullet under the next section. I have right now, but may add some language. But
Yeah.
BWXT is serving as a manufacturing partner for NuScale Power in the development of a small modular reactor. We will change the following bullet from the first word from 3 to 2 and take out Jefferson Lab. That's good. And then on page 13, we changed 2018 to 2019. Okay. Any other changes that people have?
Essentially the exact words.
So if there are no other changes, what I would like is a motion to approve the annual report as amended.
I will move that.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Great. And so we will get that, I'll work with Randy, we'll get that submitted. Are there any updates from member companies?
Yeah, I provided Randy an update for the AMS listing, and also, you know, we always have to change the name of whoever the president is, but the column says Virginia Presence, and it always had the national headquarters in Illinois. So I added the fact that there are local section, there's a local Virginia section and a VCU student section, so I added that to make it more evident what the relevance is.
Great. Any other updates? I included this in our report, but Framatome acquired another Virginia company, FoxGuard Solutions. They're out of Christiansburg, Virginia. I'm learning more about them, actually, but they're in the cybersecurity and infrastructure world, so there's about 100 or so employees in Christiansburg, so we're welcoming in the office.
Tom, just earlier this year, only a few months ago, BWXT, we restarted our TRISO fuel line that we've been working on since early 2000s, and our fuel's has been and is being irradiated up at INL at the ATR. So we just continuing, we made our own investments to keep that going and restart that within our Lynchburg facility.
Which is great. Okay, so we talked, do we have anything else on the winter AMS Winter Conference? Okay. So then the 2020 meeting schedule, what I'm going to ask Brandy to do is send out a doodle poll. We're going to try to keep the structure in terms of the general times for each quarterly meeting. Roughly what we've had this year, I think that's worked okay, but we'll try to at least get the first 2 meetings, I would think, on the calendar. So she'll send out a poll. Please take a look at that and we'll lock in those meetings. And then, as always, if you have suggestions for speakers or folks that you think would be useful for this group to hear from, please pass those along to Brandy or myself. We're always open. It's really helpful and great to have folks like Mark who can join us and tell us what they're doing in the state.
Are you allowed to tell us what's going on with the NuScale?
Not in any real detail. I mean, here.
If I know more than you read in the press, I'd be happy to, but I just
It's public information. So.
Speaking of speakers, just to remind anyone who
Yes.
might be in Northern Virginia, tomorrow at noon, Naomi Hirose, who's the vice chairman for Tokyo Electric Power Company, is giving a seminar at Merton Hall, George Mason in Fairfax, on the progress since the Fukushima accident. So it's tomorrow at noon. If you're in Northern Virginia, please come by Merton Hall at noon and listen to Mr. Hirose-san talk about Fukushima.
Okay, any other business? Okay, we'll open it up for public